Hey guys, welcome to the priming video. Hopefully you saw the video before this one where we went over how to prep and prepare your paint project. Now we're going to get into priming, which is the foundation of any painting project that you're working on. I'm going to go over why and when you should use certain primers. So let's jump into that right now. Alright, first primer we're going to talk about is an etching primer. Etching primer is a one-part primer, which means it does not take a hardener. It is really fast drying. You can sand it in 60 minutes, and it has anti-corrosive properties in it, which means if you put it over metal, it's going to keep your metal from rusting. The only problem with etching primer is it isn't high filling. If you write your name with a permanent marker on your panel and you spray etching primer over it, you should still be able to see the permanent marker through it. So what this is really good for is right before you're about to paint, if you notice there's some spots that you missed, some metals that maybe you were sanding and you cut through and you expose some metal, you can hit it with some etching primer really quick. It'll dry super fast, you scuff it up, and then you can get right into painting. So it's a good last minute primer. The next primer we're going to talk about is urethane primer and how you use that one. Alright, so the urethane primers, these are pretty much the industry standard when it comes to priming nowadays. They usually have a hardener, which is great. That means it's going to dry all the way through and you're going to have very little chemical reaction with other products. The urethane primer dries relatively fast, within an hour to 2 hours. It sands really easy and it has a nice build thickness, which is great for good foundational work when it comes to priming. They pretty much go over everything. They can go over other painted surfaces, other primers. Some of them can go over plastic and metal. Not all of them can though, so make sure you check your can before you spray it on. And this is pretty much what you're going to see and use out there nowadays. It's just really good primer, sands easy, dries fast, and really good build. So this is what I would recommend if you're going into do your paint job the correct way. The next primer we're going to talk about is epoxy and why and when you should use that one. Alright, the next primer we're going to talk about is the epoxy primer. The epoxy primer is the old school version of primer. It was pretty popular back in the day and still is for everything that it can do. It has anti-corrosive properties, which means if you put it over metal, it'll help it from rusting. It's a really nice high building primer, which means it'll give you a good foundation on your paint projects. And if you mix it a certain way, it can be used on what's called a wet-on-wet sealer, which means you can spray it on and you won't have to sand it before you paint. So it's a really flexible, really all-around good primer. The problem you run into is the dry times and the sanding. Epoxy primer takes a long time to dry, sometimes 4 to 8 hours depending on the weather conditions. And when you go to sand it, it is very hard. It dries super strong, which is good for some situations, but if you're trying to do a quick turnaround, like you're doing this for the weekend, it takes forever to sand. It's a lot of hard work. So we usually use this on restoration jobs, something that's not going to be done this weekend. Maybe you're working on it for a few weeks at a time. You can put this on, it can dry hard and protect your panel and until you get back to it again, maybe in a couple weeks. So that's where I would use this. The next thing we're going to talk about is what to do with plastic pieces, because they take a special way of preparing them and prepping them. So let's jump into that. Alright, so if you're working on plastic pieces, plastic is a little different. Not a lot of products stick to plastic because of the way that it's made, so you have to prime in a certain way. The first thing you can use is what's called an adhesion promoter. Adhesion promoters aren't necessarily primer. What they are is a glue. So when you spray this over the plastic, the glue will stick to it, and then you can paint over that, and the paint and the glue will bond together. So this is a temporary fix. It's not the most permanent. If you're doing something small like a mirror or like a door handle, something quick and easy, this is a really good way to go because it dries fast, it's pretty simple, not really hard to work with. The right way to go about it though is a flexible primer. These are primers that are specially made for plastic. They're flexible so they'll be able to bend and not crack off. They work like normal primers, so when you spray them on you have to wait a certain amount of time and then sand them. But this is going to be more of your permanent fix. It'll bond to your plastic, your paint will bond to the primer, and it'll be good for a couple years to come. So that is how you prime certain surfaces. Tomorrow's video we're going to go into painting, the fun video. So look out for your emails, get ready for that one, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.